All right. Hello, zoology people. Good to be back again here to discuss the agnathan category. So, if you've been following along in the book, you know that our author puts a lot of emphasis on the fossil record, fossil evidence, which is good. It's informative. I'll tell you right now, though, that a lot of those fossil sort of key important species, fossilized species, I'm not going to ever ask you any of that on the exam. So I want us to focus on what we have now around us. We call the extant species. The fossil evidence gives us a nice history, and even us as individuals, the history that we go through, the experiences that we acquire make us the person that we are today. Same kind of thing in the evolutionary sense for these organisms. But you're going to see several names, and the taxonomy gets confusing and chaotic. But they're going to consider these extant forms, these living forms, as cyclostomes. So cyclostomes. I'm going to use that term a little bit, but I prefer this term here. Gnatha, this gnatha, which basically describes jaw, like a functional jaw structure. And if we put an A before, we have, and I pronounce the G, but I call them the agnathans. These are basically organisms without movable jaws. So your jaw is functional. You have the mandibles, we have the joints that can open and close. These basically fish, kind of very primitive types of fish, not eels. They're not technically eels, but these organisms would have that quality of not having a jaw. So the jawless fish. Again, the phylogeny, the evolutionary history, kind of showing us how we move from the invertebrate category to then the chordates, and then now we link into this sort of chordate group, more specifically the agnathan group. So there's our urochordates, our cephalochordates, and then we're in this category here of the craniata, sort of pertaining to the skull, some of the extant forms, and then we're going to focus on these two branches of these agnathans, cyclostome groups. So what does it mean to be a cyclostome, right? Humans, we are not cyclostomes, right? Cyclostomes would have a single nostril, so they only have one breathing apparatus, but technically they're not breathing through the nostril, they breathe through gills, right? So they have these pouched gills with branchial supports, something that's going to enable them to sort of move water over those gills. We call it a velum. So velum is an anatomical feature found for the first time in this group that we call the cyclostomes, right? A pharyngeal, pertaining to the pharynx, pharyngeal flap that helps pump water over the gills. So internally, remember, they don't have those functional jaws, but they do have a toothed tongue per se, right? It's not a tongue like what you and I would have. It's keratinized. Just like, think of our tongue made up of fingernail, of keratin. So it's a muscular keratinized toothed tongue, right? And again, that just different than what we're used to. The arcualia, that kind of deals more with the structure, the primitive structure that's going to make the vertebrae in more advanced vertebrates here, right? So pertaining to the skeletal system, cyclostome characteristics continued. So usually when we talk about vertebrates, we talk about paired appendages, right? If I have a left arm, I have a right arm. If I have a left ear, I have a right ear. So we have what we call bilateral symmetry. We do see that a little bit. We have gills on one side, we have gills on the other. One eye on one side, one eye on the other. But as far as the fins go, we do start to see then this unpaired sort of scenario, unpaired sort of anatomy of fins. And this is quite interesting, the idea of an immune system. So When you think of an immune system, you think of antibodies. Our antibodies develop memory, our antibodies build up, they fight foreign invaders, and that's how our system works. But the system has not always worked like that. And these cyclostomes give us a little insight as to basically how you can have a functional immune system without having antibodies. So that's sort of the sort of a primitive thing, but hey, they're still alive. They have not gone extinct, so it seems to function for them, right? Now, something I want you to keep focus on as you're looking through the little study guide, as you're listening to this lecture, don't get stuck in the memorization mode, right? Don't get stuck. I'm going to backtrack here. Don't get stuck. Oh, I have to remember what is a velum? What is a velum? What is arcualia? What are branchial supports, right? I'm not going to test you on a memorization basis. I want you to apply these themes, the theme of ecology, the theme of evolution. How are these things going to have an impact? So if you have no functional jaws, what kind of ecology is going to have to be in play now, right? I can't go take a bite out of something. So that's going to have an impact on the way that I would function, how I would survive. So again, don't forget all of those themes that you've learned in the Labster simulations, on exam 1, ecology, evolution, taxonomy. So all of these are going to be important facets for this second exam here, right? In the context of these jawless fish. So again, crazy names again, right? So we know we have the cyclostome group, the agnathan group, and again, there's conflict whether they're subphyla or superclasses. I'm not going to get bogged down with the taxonomy. Just presenting another name here, right? The Myxiniformes, right? Which we pertain now to the, or which pertains to the hagfish. And that's not a term of endearment. It's kind of, oh, you old hag. So it's not a nice name that they're given. People don't like these when they are around their areas. And an incorrect name, right? Technically, these are not eels, right? We're going to cover eels later in the semester. These particular fish, these hagfish, are not eels, right? Taxonomically speaking, but I can see how they can be confused. Maybe a long cylindrical fish that's very slimy. So slime eels, I don't use that term too often. I use this term more, the hagfish. So these are deep sea, cold water inhabitants. So you will find these, in the ocean. They typically live in a scavenger type life. And again, going back to the ecology, if you have jaws that can't open and close, it's going to make it very difficult for you to be an effective predator, right? And there may be some predatory behavior, predatory potential in some of the species, but we normally consider them to be scavengers, right? Eating dead prey. We start to look now internally. This should take you back to 1306, the idea of isotonic. It's very odd for this particular type of group, the hagfish, to become, it's odd that they are isotonic to their environment. That's weird, right? So it would be like if you jump in the ocean, you stay in there for a little while, and then your body becomes salty. We become isotonic, the same salt composition as the ocean. And then you jump into fresh water, and all of a sudden it changes, and your body composition becomes similar to fresh water. Strange. That doesn't typically happen. We retain our own tonicity when we're in salt water. We retain our own tonicity when we're in fresh water because of our kidneys, because of our ability to regulate our ions, our salts, that kind of stuff. The kidneys, the quote unquote kidneys of these fish are very primitive, and they don't try to keep a different environment internally compared to externally. So they allow these fish to become isotonic to their environment. And again, that's going to have some evolutionary sort of impacts and a lot of ecological impacts as well. So a lot of species, so about 70 species or more, um, two different types here, and I caught an error in my slide here. These should be italicized. So I want you to get into the habit of seeing scientific names either underlined or italicized. So I'll go back and correct that in my lecture after this. So again, just collectively looking at the hagfish, all the multiple species, and sort of having these similar qualities to them. So there's a picture, and again, the size varies depending on the species, but I would say maybe a foot to 2 foot, 2 feet long in some cases. Kind of a flattened tail for swimming, that single unpaired fin, these little barbels for sensory as they swim around. They do have eyes, but the eyes are covered in a layer of skin. So they don't actually have what we consider good vision. That's why they have these barbels. And you would say, well, you know, why the barbels, right? Well, why no eyes? Well, if you remember where they live in the deep ocean. It's dark, not a lot of light penetrates, so there's really no basis, no need, no necessity for eyes if they're not going to be functional. So instead, you have those little barbels that can function as sensory organs there. Another example, just some of the little, talk about gill pouches. We're going to talk a little bit later about the slime that they produce. I don't know if you've seen some of the videos that I posted. The mouth structure, kind of unique in nature. And hagfish always remind me of some science fiction monster, right? It's a weird structure. We have these tooth plates, and again, they don't have that that functional mandibular jaw motion, right? So it functions differently the way that they feed, but showing the barbels and showing these teeth plates, longitudinal tooth plates. So ours would be not longitudinal, but sort of crosswise. All right, what makes these hagfish interesting, at least in my perspective, is the slime glands. This is quite unique. And it seems like this is a carryover from spiders, right? From that arachnid world and the production of web, spider web. Think of spider web, but think of it magnified by 100 and more slime and more slimy and sticky. And it's just a very unique defense mechanism that they use. So if you were to agitate this hagfish here, right, it would produce a tremendous amount of slime. And the slime is like threads. It's like kind of that silly string, but clear. And when that thread interacts with the salt water, it just kind of has a chemical reaction, and it's just a mess of slime, right? And anytime they're threatened, if they're attacked by a fish, by a predator, they release this slime, and you can imagine biting into like spider web, like super glue, right? It starts to now affect the way that you can function, the way that your jaws work. So it's a clever defense for what seems like a defenseless type of fish here. And again, just showing you that it's kind of hard to really visualize what that looks like, right? What it feels like, I should say. It's slime. It's sticky and it coagulates. It traps. And you imagine you have a mouthful of that. It can kind of clog up your mouth where you couldn't function afterwards. So again, a unique defense for these fish. So who would have thought that kind of innocent looking little worm-like creature, this hagfish with those, scary looking jaw, or I should say scary looking teeth plates, and then that slime production, right? So that's what that looks like. It's all sticky, slimy. I did post a video, a little news report, and I know exactly where this happened. I was not there at the time, but up on Oregon Highway 101. It's a neat, very scenic route. Apparently there was a truck transporting fish, seafood, and I didn't realize there was a market for live hagfish, but hey, apparently there is. There was a traffic accident, and a bunch of these hagfish got, splattered throughout the highway. They're agitated, they're scared, and they released all their slime. Yeah, and it's just interesting array of pictures here. So you can see all the hagfish, the cars, right? If you imagine, riding on ice, basically, all the slime on the highway. I would have loved to have seen the insurance companies, right? What is that insurance company? Farmers, bum, 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 right? They've seen a thing or two, something like that. So I bet that's the first time ever in the history of insurance companies that they've had to pay out insurance for slime on the highway, right? For hagfish slime on the highway. So big old pile up, right? Causing a lot of chaos. I would imagine that's going to take a long time to get out of that car, right? That's a mess of slime. But all those hagfish, it gives you a size reference as well, right? You can see they're not necessarily small creatures. They do have some size to them. Looking at these hagfish there. As far as their reproductive biology, they're oviparous, meaning that they lay eggs. So they lay the eggs. When they lay the eggs, they have these little sticky ends that can attach and adhere to other eggs or to the environment to kind of stay in place. There are some species that have been known to be hermaphroditic, so that they have both male and female sexes in the singular individual, right? So kind of unique for vertebrates. We're going to hear other vertebrates that do that, but it's not too super common. The species that have both male and female sexes tend to have a very uneven sex ratio, right? And I don't know, let's put this now in the perspective of ecology, evolution. If there's 100 females to 1 male, all of a sudden that kind of changes the dynamics of the mating strategies, right? Maybe you males out there in the audience here, right? Say, man, that'd be cool. If there was 100 females to 1 male, all of a sudden the males become sort of like the limiting factor. And then the males would get more sort of that selective choice, selective power, right? So again, you have this skewed ratio where the males, again, much less common than the females, right? And what would that then do if there's a lot more females? What does that do to the reproductive potential, right? So if it was the other way, right? A lot of males to female, well, that would then limit the reproductive potential. There'd be more competition between males, less potential offspring that could be reproduced. With this skewed ratio, that has a big impact on we should say, on the population ecology, population biology of these hagfish. So we'll get to that a little bit more as we continue later. Well, I don't want to continue with these yet, so let me stop the video for the hagfish, and then I'll continue with the second video on the lamprey.